Welcome to Clean Air Action's award-winning podcast, Cleaning Up Dirty. We talk politics with non-toxic people. I'm Liz Green-Schultz. I'm the political director of a nonprofit called Clean Air Action.
And I'm Sean Hoffman, legislative director. Liz and I run Clean Air Action, which is the proud sister organization of the Clean Air Council, the oldest environmental and public health organization in Pennsylvania.
Together, we fight for your constitutional right to breathe healthy air. Over here at Clean Air Action, we fight dirty with clean. That applies to anyone who messes with our political and civil rights, including corporations and politicians.
Today, we are extremely excited to have the executive director of the Ohio River Valley Institute, Joanne Kilgour.
Woo!
Hey, Joanne, what's happening?
Good morning.
We are so excited to have you.
Thank
How
you
are
for
you?
coming.
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, glad to have you on the program. Joanne is a lawyer with a passion for justice and democracy, committed to securing social, economic, and environmental policies that support communities while demanding long-term structural change. In her time with the Ohio River Valley Institute, Joanne led a research initiative to support Pennsylvania in securing nearly $400 million to invest.
Big deal.
Yeah, that's a big chunk of change to invest in decarbonizing the industrial sector, the highest emitting sector statewide that accounts for just over 30% of Pennsylvania's total greenhouse gas emissions, so roughly a third. And that was part of the RISE PA program.
And since this is a political podcast and we like to talk about some spicy stuff, we like to keep snacks on hand in case we need to eat our feelings.
Uh-oh.
Now, last time...
Part of the program you've all been waiting for, the snack reveal.
Yep. I was basically told to step my game up by Sean Hoffman.
I'm truly afraid of what that means.
Careful what you wish for.
Is it the pickle roulette again? Is it?
It's not pickle roulette, but we do have some pickle action.
Oh, no.
Sour Power pickle straws.
Why do people keep making these pickle products? I don't understand. Clearly there's a market for it.
I'm obsessed. Have you ever had a pickle candy?
I will admit to you that I mostly don't like pickles.
Yes, Joanne! Finally, a kindred spirit on the program. I'm also largely anti-pickle.
Well, thank you for coming on the podcast. Have a nice day.
Thank you all.
She can stay as long as she likes.
But for you, Liz, I will try a Sour Power pickle straw.
We have to. It is part of
exciting.
the requirements of the podcast. We have to try them. We don't have to like them.
Yeah.
That's
But you are legally obligated. But don't you worry. If you would like to select your pickle candy, I have another.
Oh, no. But wait, there's more.
It's Guppers.
Whoa.
Even the name is gross. What the hell is a gupper?
I don't know.
What is this?
Poppin' Pickles. Juicy sour pickle artificial flavored center and sweet pickle gummy candy.
It sounds like a British import. Guppers. They're squishy pickles. Poppin' pickles. Guppers of London. It's, why?
I'm so excited.
Because it can't be Gushers. It has to be Guppers.
Yeah, Gushers is taken.
But who's
so.
sitting around in the candy ideas room and they're like, you know what we should make? A pickled flavor. And you know what? It's not just going to be pickled. It'll be filled with pickled juice that will explode into your mouth when you eat it.
I'm so
Who
excited.
wants that?
I do.
Apparently, millions.
I do. I pretty much pick up any weird snacks that I can
Amazing.
find.
I will say, for my Western Pennsylvania cohort, there is Picklesburg in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And so many things are transformed into pickles or decorated
What?
like pickles. So, Liz, I feel that you may need to do a recording of the podcast during Picklesburg in Pittsburgh.
I haven't. It's like a festival?
Clearly.
I can't believe I've never heard of this before now. This is so exciting.
Now, listen, I love Yinzer culture. I'm all about it. But Picklesburg sounds like my nightmare. It sounds like my hell.
Sounds
we
like
should
my
go.
dream.
We should do it.
Yeah, we could do podcasting.
I'm going to be going to Nostril Territory.
Amazing. Do you know roughly when? Is it a festival?
It is a festival. I think you could call it a festival. I do not know when because as a non-pickle fan, I generally don't track it for myself. But I really support Pittsburgh and all the people that it brings in for all of its festivities.
Yeah, Joanne's out of town when the Pickle Fest comes.
Well, between the Sour Power straws and the Guppers, perhaps you'll be a convert.
That's
and you'll
right.
be flocking to Picklesburg.
You never know.
This
You
year.
never know
It
until
could
you
be
try.
that I was waiting my whole life for guppers to convert me.
What on earth? Why?
I love this.
Ugh, they even feel gross, guys.
I brought a softball.
I'm squishing them a little bit, and I'm just, it's
so
why?
exciting.
Why did you make these?
And then I brought a softball candy, Haribo Happy Chicks, because I figured
that's much more my speed.
that's fit with the podcast episode.
Just some Easter-themed gummy candies. Like, come on.
Yeah, this is the boring, easy softball of a candy.
These guppers, I don't know if I can handle them. Truly, they're frightening me.
Sean, we're gonna have to go through the pickle gauntlet here.
I know. It's Joanne and I are maybe in trouble. I'm gonna start with the Sour Power
Give it a
straws.
go.
If I can figure out how to open them. Yep. There we go. Okay. Ugh. They're glistening. Glistening with their pickleness. I'm going to do a green one. There's a green and yellow. I'm not sure what the difference is, but they're also vegan, in case you were afraid of non-veganness.
Right. I love that. I'm going to go yellow since you went green.
Good. We'll get the full flavor spectrum.
Oh, this is so exciting.
I really want to meet the food scientist behind guppers.
Likewise. I have so many questions.
I like them. No surprise there.
Ugh.
Okay. Yellow, I think, was a good choice.
Yeah.
Joanne's taking the yellow.
I'm going to have to taste test it. I want to know what the yellow is like.
I actually don't even think I got a... No, I take it back. There's pickle. There's pickle. At first, I was like, oh, maybe it's just green apple. Nope. No. There's pickle.
Ooh. I really appreciate the sour because I think without the sour, I'd be in trouble.
Likewise, yeah. We have puckering faces here.
I actually think the yellow is more puckery. You might want to try the green. No pressure.
It was a lot. It was intense.
Do you want to try the yellow?
Not really.
Did you taste the pickle in it? I feel like it could have been picklier.
It could have. Bobby is absolutely correct.
What a statement.
It's not as pickly as the pickle roulette pickle.
It's going for like kind of centrist. Like there's a little bit of pickle for people that like pickle, but it's not too much if you don't.
Well said. If you're trying to like work your way into more hardcore pickle candies, this is a good gateway one to try. The pickle straw.
I love it. Huge fan.
I'm so
Bobby,
scared.
are you a pickle fan outside of sour pickle
I am. I like pickles of all kinds. Pickled tomatoes, bring them on. Everything.
See, Bobby's a good barometer.
I've never had a pickled tomato.
They're great. They're green. They're crunchy.
I wonder if I could get some at Picklesburg.
I'm sure.
Guaranteed. I'm sure you could get pickled things there you never thought
Very fun.
would be pickled.
Now, do we dive into the guppers? Do we save them?
I am terrified. I'm absolutely terrified of the guppers.
Let's save them for a moment.
Okay.
We gotta marinate on those.
Sounds
we gotta
good.
build up to the guppers.
Just to launch them on Sean at the right moment.
Oh, that sounds
God,
spectacular.
I told you, I was feeling like they're so juicy. They're just like, I'm scared.
Spectacular. So exciting.
Let's get into some substance. We've been dwelling in the pickle zone long enough. How long have you been doing this work, Joanne?
Such a good question. So I think back to so many different parts of my life. And one of them is early on, a friend of mine in 7th grade sat next to me one day at lunch and said, I'm part of a youth group at our local Peace and Justice Center. Shout out Bangor, Maine Peace and Justice Center.
Wow.
And asked me if I would come to their Bring a Friend night.
Okay.
So I went to Bring a Friend night at the Peace and Justice Center.
You were the friend they brought?
I was one of the friends, and it turned into a really transformative part of my young life. So I had the opportunity to work with some really amazing young people in my community and also their parents and the staff at the Peace and Justice Center.
Cool.
So this would have been, like mid-90s, late 90s.
Golden
and
age.
yeah, so a lot of the work that was happening was really around the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank and the WTO and anti-sweatshop campaigns. And so we had some really interesting solidarity with communities in El Salvador. So coming out of the Civil War in El Salvador, there was a U.S. El Salvador Sister Cities program that was established. And so, again, I started out in middle school and was learning about international dynamics of, what role the United States played in the Civil War in El Salvador, and how some communities, a whole generation of people were unfortunately killed during the fighting. And in all these small villages, it was the young people who were trying to rebuild.
Wow.
So our sister city had a mayor at the time who was 16 years old.
Unbelievable.
And we were just fascinated by telling the story of how young people can be taken seriously, their decision-making matters, their perspective on the world matters, and even in some of their countries, they are in the positions of political decision-making, really out of necessity. So that work really took me on a journey through understanding power dynamics, and I have always been motivated by this idea of just outcomes, and that people who are in the most vulnerable positions really deserve a society that works for them and that thinks about their interests. And that took me to environmental work because as I was a law student in Pittsburgh, it was right around the time that oil and gas extraction and the fracking boom really started to have pervasive effects on rural communities.
Wow.
And so again, we saw these power dynamics playing out where people who were already in really vulnerable positions had no one to really stand up and represent them. And so that was the work of our environmental law clinic, was being able to represent people who otherwise would not have had legal representation. And that took me then on this journey that I'm still on, and really pleased to be able to still be doing this work and hopefully helping bring others into it.
For sure.
Wow. What a story.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Just like your average environmental lawyer.
That's right. Well, I think it's interesting, though, the term you use, just outcomes, I think is the thing that a lot of us from many different varied backgrounds kind of get to that place. And some of us get to it younger and some of us get to it older. I'm a, conservation birds and bunnies guy. Like that was my gateway to environmentalism, is wanting to help preserve the plants and animals of the planet for generations to come after us. But also, too, so much of it eventually morphed into this, like, treating our planet and our public health well is just for everyone, for all of us. And especially for those of us who are in some of the poorest places, who have the least ability to speak for ourselves, much like the environment itself, right? Who speaks for the trees, right?
Yeah, it's really interesting, the intersection of our three stories, because I've never heard a story like that from a fellow environmental attorney, but it tracks mine a little bit, which is interesting. I did not have the middle school come up in this movement. That is incredible. I've never heard of a Peace and Justice Center. That's amazing. I didn't really think about these issues until this job. I was a Spanish teacher, and then I became a criminal defense attorney. So I have approached it from a lens of like state power and fighting for the little guy, but in a very different way. So very interesting, especially the Latin American overlap there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I'm curious, this isn't on our list of questions, but your gateway to this stuff was through middle school when you were a kid. And I remember also clubs like that, things where, social media didn't exist, right? And so it was literally like someone word of mouth, or you saw a poster outside the cafeteria or something like that, and then you went, you did the thing. Do you think there, and this is just, us riffing here, but like young people today, do they have the same gateways available to them? I don't know.
We've seen these pockets of real interest in offline connection. Like there are, the camps of people who are reading books together. They just create adult summer camp where they go and read books together. And their connection is over their love of fiction and being offline together, just spending time reading and talking about books. And a lot of that, interestingly, started online, as I understand it, but moved offline out of a real desire of people to have that strong in-person connection. And I think there are groups of young people who are increasingly switching to phones that are not as smart as iPhones, or maybe are iPhones but are bricked in some way, and are really looking for that connection. And I don't know if it's this way in Philly, but there seemed to be also a rise of late night gaming spots, right?
Oh,
so
yeah.
instead
It is
of just
absolutely a Philly thing.
Yeah.
Definitely. I was in one a couple of weeks ago. playing board games late into the night.
Definitely.
It's a thing. Yeah.
And tea
And there's
cafes.
actually a city council member who's trying to make Philly the gaming capital of the country.
I didn't know that.
Yep, Isaiah
What's
Thomas.
Up? What's up, Isaiah Thomas? Nice.
But I think like one of the most important parts of my story is that someone asked me.
Right.
You know?
Yes.
That it was like, I left to my own devices, who knows if I would have found that community or this work, but somebody who knew me and wanted me to be part of their community said, will you come to one thing with me?
Yeah.
You know? And I think that's a really powerful takeaway, is just like,
absolutely.
ask the person,
Yeah.
you know, talk to the person, be vulnerable, ask them to do whatever the thing is that you're passionate about with you. And sometimes it can lead to, a whole radical career.
Absolutely. I got a little chills when Joanne was just saying that, because I was like, you know, I think back to when I was a kid in middle school and high school, and I'm fortunate enough that I still have some buddies, some friends from that time that I'm still very close with. And, you know, occasionally we'll sort of revisit like, oh, how did we end up doing this? Or how did we end up here? And even things I've forgotten, someone will bring up and I'll be like, really? I invited you to this thing, or you invited me to that thing? And then now we're still friends all these years later. And I think too, people are hungry to get outside, as you say. People are hungry to connect physically. And we're also living in a time where people are like, what can I do? How can I feel like I'm not a bystander or just adrift on the tide here and at the mercy of forces bigger than myself? And for many, 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 many of us, it's so big and we don't know what to do, but it's a place to start. Yeah. Get out there, get with some people, whatever it is, you know, whether it's an environmental thing or not. And it's really cool to see that that's, you know, spreading.
And speaking of unjust power, in America 2026, where everybody's trying to wrap their mind around, what do I do? How do I help fulfill the promise of democracy of this country? I'm sure that's how everybody wakes up in the morning thinking about that.
Yeah.
And what you said about, will you come to one thing with me? What a beautiful statement.
Yeah.
Because, you know, the idea of inviting someone to join the environmental movement, well, they'd be more interested in this pickle straw, which, by the way, I will go for a second one because I am very into them.
Listen, some people might be really into the pickle straw.
I'm going to do another one, too.
Yeah.
In probably the most surprising move. I, too, am going to have another pickle straw.
Look, we're already changing hearts and minds. You should try a green one, though, because the yellow seems a little more in your face. And, you know, it's maybe the time of the green straw, of just trying to give people a soft foothold.
Bobby and I are good on the one. We're going to abstain.
What do you think?
Actually, I had two.
Oh, but Bobby already had two.
I think green is slightly stronger in the pickle flavor, but not so strong that it's off-putting.
Right. As Bobby said, it's a good pickle gateway. We're talking a lot about gateways today.
Love that. Well, anytime anybody's ready for a guppers, go ahead and let me know. But, you know, as we're trying to wrap our minds around how to participate in democracy in a way that shapes our country in the right direction, that is a sour enough foothold, but not too sour, that feels like such a great story to kick off this episode about myths of dirty industry, because we have some conversational territory ahead of us with this podcast today, because we've asked you to come on to talk to us about some of the myths of industry, the promises that are not fulfilled. So, Joanne, what is a petrochemical plant?
Okay, so
Let's get into it.
There are, of course, many kinds of petrochemical facilities, but I think what I want to do is just first paint a picture for you.
Yeah.
Which is thinking about one of the largest and most polluting petrochemical facilities in Pennsylvania, the Shell cracker plant.
Dun, dun, dun.
So the Shell cracker plant, essentially what it does is it takes a feedstock, like natural gas, and turns it into a chemical product that can be used to then create other things. Plastics, other kinds of plastic products. It's this huge industrial process. And so if you imagine sitting in Beaver County is beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Up
that
on
in
the
Western
hill,
Pennsylvania.
And, you know, traditional river valley in kind of what we think of as the Appalachian landscape.
And the drive there is unbelievably gorgeous.
Yeah,
It's beautiful.
The first time I drove out there, I was just like a dog with my head out the window and my tongue hanging out, just the hills, the valleys, the mountains, the rivers. It's gorgeous. And that's the land that Pennsylvanians have a constitutional right to be protected that you'd think nobody's ever heard of.
Right.
Absolutely. It's stunning. And you come up to the top of a hill and you look out to your right and you see this, beautiful hills and a library down along the bank of the river. And then you turn to your left and it's such a stark contrast because all you see is this huge industrial landscape where you have flares that are flaring off excess hydrocarbons. You have trucks that are moving around. You have big smokestacks. You have a ton of other industrial activity going on. And it is just a deeply jarring contrast from what you see when you drive through the beautiful terrain or you look in the other direction. And so often when we talk about these chemical processes or these industrial plants, what can be lost is what the lived experience of that is like.
For sure.
And what it feels like to be a resident of this beautiful river valley and to be constantly inundated with noise from the facility, with flaring, even sometimes at night, right? Like occasionally there is ground flaring at night and it just lights up the whole sky.
I actually saw that from my hotel room. Yeah. It looks like a city.
I was just going to say, it's like a little city.
Yeah.
It's right on the river there, and it's just trees on both sides of the bank, and then they just sort of sliced out a big, giant slice of what is otherwise beautiful forested riverbank and plunked down this monstrous little city of an industrial site. And the Shell cracker plant, it sounds like a Nabisco plant. It sounds like they're not making crackers. They're not, there is no,
if they were.
It is,
would love a cracker.
Yeah, it's nasty stuff. And it really is jarring when you're out there. And I grew up in the Philly suburbs, Bucks County. And, I think a lot of people, especially you grew up in a city, you grew up in the suburbs, which I think you lump those two together. That's probably the majority of the population of the country. And you don't see these kinds of things. They're just not there. You hear about sort of industry. What do you think of these sort of like a factory with smokestacks somewhere doing something? But until you've seen it and heard it and smelled it, it's a completely different experience.
Breathed the polluted air that's coming from it because the Shell plant has been fined, right, for violations. And of course, since these are corporations, the taxpayers aren't footing any of the bill on behalf of the corporations, right?
Right. I mean, that's just part of the irony of the whole situation is not only do you have this incredibly disruptive facility, but also the recognition that it received one of the largest taxpayer subsidies in Pennsylvania history, $1.6 billion, almost $2 billion going to facilitate this development. And, it took at least a decade to get to the point where it was partially operational. It was riddled with malfunctions during the operational phases. Liz, you mentioned the $10 million fine. That was one of the largest fines that the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection has levied that went in to create a community fund.
But of course, many would say that's not nearly high enough of a fine.
Yeah, and even the premise of fining after the fact.
It doesn't fix what happened.
Exactly. The impact was still there. Even now, we see there are more and more violations that are coming in to varying degrees of severity, and the permit is there, right, so that it can be at least somewhat protective of human health and the environment.
Right.
And when you're not able to stay within the bounds of that permit, even when you're knowingly doing a highly polluting activity, it just demonstrates that we're subsidizing an activity that we know is contributing to decreased quality of life.
And to be clear, there's no healthy level of this air pollution, land pollution, water pollution, right? So it's not that we've really researched this and we know this is the safe amount of poison to put into our air, land, and water, right? Is that an overstatement for me to say?
There are legal limits that are set based on certain criteria, but as we're seeing from the current administration, even those limits are shifting. So it's an open question about how we set policy and who it's intended to protect. And, one of the things that we see with our research is that part of the premise of creating public subsidy for facilities like petrochemical facilities is that they contribute to shared prosperity. They contribute to our economy, they contribute to jobs, they contribute to downstream industry. And we've been able to track what's happened in Beaver County since the development of the Shell cracker plant. And what we're seeing is that by almost all the metrics that we track publicly for economic health and the health of the population, it's just not meeting that mark. So even the premise that that was based on is not coming to fruition. It's just a question that we need to be asking ourselves, which is if there are certain values associated with the policies that we're enacting, like a $1.6 billion tax credit. And I should say it's not just limited to that. There are other kinds of tax credits and tax incentives that are available throughout the region for petrochemical facilities, including outside of Pennsylvania. Grants made by economic development authorities to pyrolysis facilities that may or may not ever come to fruition. And even if they were, would not likely be able to deliver on their economic promise and would be highly polluting.
Yeah. And for those who don't know, a pyrolysis facility is...
They heat up plastic to break it down into the subparts of plastic to use for other things. And it's usually linked to this misnomer of chemical recycling. I say it's a misnomer because it's not really recycling. It's not recycling as we would traditionally think of it. It sort of takes nasty stuff, does a nasty process to give us more nasty stuff. And did I get that right, Joanne? Is there anything I probably missed something in there?
Yeah, I mean, one of the key things is that it's essentially taking often plastic waste and turning it into things that can create other kinds of products. You know, like one of the facilities that we're currently looking at takes plastic waste and turns it into something called py oil or pyrolysis oil that then becomes a feedstock for another process. You know, there have been some studies that show that this kind of process is actually more polluting than creating virgin plastics. And virgin plastics just means plastics created from natural gas or petroleum products.
Right. And that's the feedstock that you'd mentioned earlier, right? That's sort of where this all starts, where you get the name petrochemical. It's a chemical derived from petroleum or in natural gas in some cases, right? Is that's sort of how that works?
Yeah.
And part of the reason all of this is happening is because culturally, suddenly we have this overwhelming amount of plastic that we don't know what to do with, right? And most of it actually isn't even recyclable. So they have to burn it to convert it into something else or toss it into the ocean. Is that generally the lay of the land? I'm not a plastics expert.
You know, one of the challenges is that the plastics industry and the petrochemical industry would like us to believe that this is a mature process. This is something that's been happening for a long time and is well established and on good financial footing. And the reality is that many of these projects are using underdeveloped technology and are in really precarious positions from a business standpoint. And so we're investing, in some cases, tens of millions of dollars of public funding into essentially experimental facilities or facilities that at least haven't demonstrated their technological or business case at the scale that they're promising. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we're seeing from a policy standpoint is that there's a push to shift the way that these facilities are regulated from waste facilities to manufacturing, right, so that they can have an easier regulatory and permitting pathway.
Wow, I'm taking a pickle straw because that feels like a pickle straw kind of moment. And environmentalists generally refer to a lot of the naming of all of this as greenwashing, right? Because even just the term chemical recycling, well, it's not recycling, but the fact that it's been named that makes people feel better about tax dollars going to that. Is that fair to say?
I think this is probably true for all of you, but as a kid and every year after, I have been taught, reduce, reuse, recycle, be a good steward. Mm-hmm. And so we are naturally...
That is not just from the Bangor Peace and Justice Center.
That's
that
right.
one I was also taught.
And so we're sort of ingrained to have this cue that anything that's called recycling is good, and it's something that we should be investing in. But we actually have to kind of probe a little further, and that's why, if you look at what is actually happening, what's actually happening is pyrolysis. What's actually happening is that you're taking waste plastic and heating it to a really high degree or using a proprietary chemical process to turn it into something that's just going to go back to being feedstock.
Right.
How much do y'all think politicians actually understand that this is what's going on?
I don't think politicians do, and I don't think the public generally does. You routinely hear folks cite as like, yeah, I like the environment, I recycle, you know, and I'm not making a joke about that. Like, that is something where, you know, to your point, Joanne, where that was sort of the foundational, do the good environmental thing, reduce, reuse, recycle. We all learned that as kids. And
That's what I thought before I started this job.
And it was good when we were talking about metal and glass. And then over time, our recyclables started to be way more, all these different kinds of plastics. You know, you have to see the little number inside the little triangle, and there's 1 through 9 or whatever, how many there are. And that's totally different. That's totally different from the old school metal and glass. But people still think about it that way. I'm recycling. Recycling is good. Recycling is good. But it's changed so much. And there's been a lot of federal legislation that's been percolating lately to try and sort of attach this recycling label to more of this plastic pyrolysis stuff to make it sound good, but it's not. It's just not. And we see this across the board in so many of these issues. This stuff is so complex and complicated that your average person on the street certainly doesn't understand it or have any clue where to even start. And I agree, too, to your question. I don't think most policymakers really get it either. And I'm curious, Joanne, you mentioned that these processes that they use are not really thoroughly vetted or fully mature as far as like working. And so I'm curious, do you think there is sort of an automatic deference on the part of some policymakers to these big industrial behemoths? I mean, Shell is an international corporation, huge, limitless money. And so they come in, with this proposal that says we want to build this crazy complex, crazy expensive thing in your backyard. It's going to make lots of money. Yeah, it's going to bring lots of money and jobs and this and that. Oh, don't worry about the fact that we really don't maybe know how it works. Like, we're chill, we're good. Do you think that's what it is? Is there deference to these companies?
I think there's certainly deference to companies that, you know, maybe the company has a history, a long track record or a history of development within the industry, but that we're not always taking a look at what actually is the process that's being proposed at this facility. What do we know about the likelihood of success, both from a technology standpoint and an economic standpoint? And ultimately, you know, what we want to reiterate is that these projects are not inevitable. That early in the 2010s, around the time that the deal for the Shell cracker plant was being finalized, the American Chemistry Council had a vision for a petrochemical renaissance for Appalachia.
Renaissance.
And so it was, you know, multiple huge multi-billion-dollar ethane cracker plants, all of the downstream and upstream infrastructure that would be needed to support them. And here we are 15 years later. And the only thing really that's materialized is the Shell cracker plant. And Shell is already on such shaky economic footing that they have said that they may be exploring a strategic partnership or a sale. So that sense of inevitability is something that really needs to be tested and challenged, and that we have to not take for granted, because even though these companies are talking about, you know, in the case of Shell, a $14 billion development, the numbers are high, and so they sound serious, and they sound like something that, of course, if someone's dealing with $14 billion, they must know what they're doing. But in reality, it's the same as a developer who's maybe doing something at a much smaller scale and is still operating in shakier waters, you know?
I was a criminal defense attorney, and one really important element of criminal defense is having somebody who can challenge the facts that are presented so that the fact finder gets a really complete image and then can decide what truth is. And one of the issues with companies like this is there isn't always somebody on the other side presenting the counter data, right? So that's part of what ORVI does, your organization?
Yeah, one of the things that we try to do as a think tank for Appalachia, a, you know, data-driven strategic communications and research organization, is to be able to analyze the facts as they're presented to us and ideally work with communities on the ground to pair facts with lived experience.
Love that. That's worth a Haribo happy chick.
Tearing through these snacks.
Yeah, you do.
Because I think, on its own, lived experience is easy or it shouldn't be, I should say, but it tends to be easy for our political officials to dismiss when they're faced with a corporation who's used to interfacing with them. And at the same time, on their own, data are very easy to dismiss because we're constantly being presented with different information. But together, if we have data that confirms lived experience, that becomes a very strong foothold. And ideally, I hope will be compelling to decision makers.
Right. Unfortunately, the political realm is not a criminal courtroom.
No, it is not.
The record doesn't matter that much. Anybody can say pretty much anything they want to say. And then either the voters vote them in or they vote them out. And when we see...
And that's not to say there's not process. There are hearings, but we sit in
there doesn't have to be. There doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
I mean, there usually is, but they got to vote through committee. And of course, there's local politicians and state politicians and federal politicians. And when you're dealing with a facility this big, every level of government is involved. But I think it's interesting, Joanne, you make a really great point about you see these eye-popping numbers paired with a well-known brand that is Shell. And it doesn't matter which political party you're from. I believe the Shell cracker plant had bipartisan support when it went in. I can think of a Democratic politician from Beaver County who proudly has that on his website, touts that as an accomplishment. So this is a bipartisan thing. When you see those big numbers paired with a well-known name, or even if it's not a well-known name, it's almost irresistible. It's almost impossible for politicians, I think, to say no to that because we see Trump doing this constantly, right? To sort of justify his tariffs. Oh, but I've got companies from all over the world coming in and promising this trillions and trillions of dollars of investment. But ballpark, how long does it take to build a petrochemical facility from the base to function? How long does that take?
So it really varies based on the scale of the project and, things like financing and the availability of the construction equipment and jobs. But I think the best example we have to point to regionally is the Shell cracker plant, where it took, let's just say, roughly a decade.
Wow.
And so in the interim, the communities around the facility also were not making significant investments in other kinds of economic development infrastructure because the promise was, here, we're going to get a complete economic renaissance from this one facility.
Yeah.
And just over the river, there was a site in Belmont County, Ohio, that was slated to be the ground for the PTTG cracker complex that has not materialized and is very unlikely to materialize. And so that is another cautionary tale of how this kind of investment is just such a bad bet for Appalachian communities, because that community has been waiting well over a decade for something that is very likely to never materialize. Mm-hmm. And in the interim, there hasn't been the kind of investment that's needed to really support shared prosperity and positive outcomes, both from an economic and quality of life standpoint for the people who live there.
Yeah. And I would love for us to drill down on this point. And I think this is sort of the underlying theme of the episode, as Liz talked about at the top, of sort of the promise that comes with these facilities in the front end. And we see this isn't exclusive to Petchem. We see this across the board in so many of these industrial processes. They promise the world on the front end and the politicians just lap it up, especially if it's a place where the population is relatively low. So for the local governments, their tax base is really low. So you're not bringing in a lot of property tax because there isn't a lot of properties. But if some big, giant, multi-billion-dollar organization wants to plop that facility down into your area that otherwise has a very low tax base, it's very hard to say no. Because the theory goes as, well, we're going to bring in so much money. We could fix our roads. We could fix the schools. We can do all the stuff we've been putting off for so long. And to your point, Joanne, the local community around the Shell cracker plant, I'm assuming, has made those sorts of calculations. And as you say, has put certain investments off and rearranged certain plans. And lo and behold, that hasn't panned out. And we've seen that all across the Commonwealth. We see it all across the nation.
And it's one of the things delaying the transition to renewable energy, right?
And local governments, state governments, again, we hear this all the time in Pennsylvania, right? It's like, oh, we're going to lose it to Ohio. We're going to lose it to West Virginia. We don't want that to happen, do we? And so it ends up being a race to the bottom. Let's see who can give these guys the biggest sweetheart deal. And now I haven't.
And once they go in, then we're also not seeing the jobs, the promise that we were given, right? And with the violations, you then can't shut the facility down. So you're just kind of locked in.
In my ideal world, policy and policymakers are working to lift up those who are in the most vulnerable positions and to enact policy that will make people's lives better when they are in the most challenging position in that society. And unfortunately, what we see is that over and over again, our research is showing that investments in petrochemical infrastructure are just a bad bet and are not serving our communities.
Yeah.
And even though I am coming from an organization that relies heavily on data, I'm trying not to, just sort of spill out numbers here at you, but to share a few. To share a few, we looked at Beaver County from 2012 to the most recently available data. And what we saw is that total private employment decreased by almost 11.6%.
Wow. That's a pretty big number. That's 1 in 10. 1 in 10.
And at the same time, SNAP recipient households, so households that receive food benefits and other key benefits, increased by 14.64%.
Wow.
Well, that's not in the reports.
Right.
Not in the public reports that are bolstering investment in dirty industry.
I'm sure Shell isn't citing those numbers.
No.
And the population decreased. So the population also went down by 1.69%.
That's a really important point I just want to emphasize, because so many of these places where industry is proposed, if you look at the population data, is showing a slow but steady decrease. People are leaving, or people
are becoming more reliant on government benefits.
Right, simply dying off, folks who are just aging out in these communities. And you are seeing the average age rise because they are folks who've lived there for a long time and seeing the young people leave. So it's an important point that, in a way, these facilities kind of poison the communities in more ways than one.
Mm-hmm. And just to kind of put a fine point on it, it's clear that our communities are struggling.
Yeah.
And we are not investing in things that will actually make life better, things that will help us put food on the table, make sure our kids are healthy, which is so critical to everyone and to a healthy society.
Yeah.
And we're foregoing transparency and accountability, and we're investing instead in industries that are structurally not set up to deliver prosperity for our local communities. They may be very capital intensive, right? We may see these big, multi-billion-dollar development numbers, but that money isn't going to support the majority of residents in Beaver County, as evidenced by this rise in the need to rely on public assistance, which,
really
if I'm a policymaker and I look at that, I say, what am I not doing for these households that is resulting in this increase over time in not being able to meet the basic needs of my family with my income?
Yeah, well said. And it's a complex, we're living in a complex world now. And I think we still, as a nation, as a state, as a species, still try to apply simple solutions. And I think part of it is, I think we're sort of still stuck in this old-timey mindset of like big factory equals big jobs, right? You need a lot of people to go work the factory. Big factory is good. That has ceased to be true a long, long time ago. With automation and, again, with the increased complexity, you don't just need hundreds and hundreds of guys pulling levers all day. These are sophisticated operations. A lot of it's automated. A lot of it's electronic or what have you. And the ones who are working in there are sophisticated employees. Ultimately, why do people say yes to this? Everybody wants prosperity. And this is the thing, we get accused of this in the environmental movement a lot. Oh, you job killers, you're trying to tear. There is literally no one in this movement, I would say perhaps even in the entire country, certainly decision makers, who is trying to take bread out of anybody's mouth, who is trying to reduce prosperity and health and happiness. That is, we are all trying to boost that to the maximum extent possible for the maximum number of humans, period, full stop. And so on the front end, people say, ooh, money, jobs, good. And in a very simple way, that makes sense. But we need to think deeper. We need our decision makers to look more than 2 inches in front of their noses and say, well, what does this really mean? Let me read up on the data. What are these guys saying? What's the actual return on this investment? Is this thing going to actually be built in less than 10 friggin' years? You know, that's part of the thing too. It's really easy to make this big announcement, but the damn factory doesn't get built, if it ever does, until several election cycles later. And so it ends up just being these hollow promises that maybe pan out, maybe don't. Again, the motivation, I believe, across the board is a good one. It's a desire to increase prosperity. But we need to look deeper and more closely at this to ensure that that's actually what happens, especially in the longer term and for the maximum amount of people. Liz is gesturing at the guppers, at the guppers now.
Feels like a great moment to pop a pickle.
Oh boy.
I don't know, is there a great moment?
We're in a petrochemical pickle.
Yeah. We sure are, Joanne. We sure are.
I hope there's no petrochemicals in here, but
Liz, you're trying this first.
Nowadays.
I don't even. They're individually
I'll
wrapped.
tell you what, even just opening the package is a really interesting sensory experience.
Liz is like wrinkling her nose at these.
Well, no pressure, but passing them around the room.
I don't know if I'm going to even be able to continue with this episode depending on how these pan out.
Why don't I give
I'm
her a
going to wait
try?
till Liz goes for one first.
For those of you who can't see us, this looks like a very realistic tiny pickle.
Yeah, it's as if they've taken actual pickles and put them in here.
We should take a picture.
Liz is
I'll tell
biting
you
at
what.
it.
Smell it. It does not smell like something you should eat. I'm just going to say.
I mean, it actually doesn't smell that pickly. It smells like a Gushers candy, kind of. I mean, so that's actually good, I think. I can't even get it open.
Do you guys remember like Nickelodeon? They would slime their guests.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like you're gonna like secretly be sliming me.
You figured it out, Joanne. We're starting the slime. We're bringing slime back.
You didn't notice the bucket over your head.
It's solid inside. Yeah.
Well, we'll see. Maybe I need a little more.
Liz is making a face.
Smell it before you really go in on.
What do you think, Bobby? Bobby's going for it. Bobby just took the house,
Sweet.
the whole thing.
It's sweet.
Oh my gosh. Legendary.
Yeah, Bobby just dove in. What do you think, man?
It tastes better than it looks and feels.
Can you?
What a ringing endorsement.
I mean, listen. I was you heard me. I was moaning.
I think
and
it
groaning.
tastes good. I don't think it tastes like a pickle. I think it tastes good. But it feels gross.
Wow.
It's like wet and squishy.
It is wet and squishy.
So actually, it's not so much pickle flavor as it's just pickle texture. It's just they just try to recreate the pickle body, and otherwise, I can't get mine open. That's why I
I had to bite it.
It's very slippery.
Not
Oh
unlike.
darn! Shoot! Oh well, I tried.
You did. We'll give you credit for that.
Maybe after the show, I'll force it open. But anyway, yes, we're in a pit of a petrochemical pickle, and
We are.
This is. I wanted to highlight this story to sort of. This is not in Pennsylvania. This is not petrochemical, but I just wanted to quickly reference this story, but that I think really highlights this concept of governments across our nation bending over backwards to give these unbelievable sweetheart deals to these companies that actually end up kind of screwing us in the long run, that don't nearly end up giving the return that they promise. And I think a lot of it is a similar concept of trickle-down economics, this sort of imagined return that if we simply lower taxes across the board and give all these benefits to the wealthy, that they will kick so much economic ass, there will be so much revenue that even the low revenue numbers will bring in so much that we will just be cooking. That never happens. That never actually happens. The wealthy end up just pocketing it. You might have heard about the Kansas City Chiefs and their stadium. They're moving it from Missouri to Kansas. This is a whole big thing. This is an NFL team you might be familiar with. The Eagles beat the pants off of them in the Super Bowl a couple of years ago.
What's
just have
up?
to represent Go Birds.
That's worth a happy chick. Would you like a happy chick, Joanne?
I'll have a happy chick, but only to the Steelers.
That's it. That's it.
We'll forgive
Pennsylvania
you that.
teams. So the Kansas City Chiefs, they've been negotiating for a long time. Kansas was over the moon. The governor out there was super stoked that they managed to pull this off. The deal is Kansas will fund roughly 60% of the $3 billion. It's going to cost them $3 billion to build a stadium. And so 60% of that is it's a little over $2 billion in total public incentives surrounding this development. So they are giving them various types of incentives. Now, the owner of the team, the Hunt family, they are worth a combined $25 billion, the owners of the Chiefs. So Kansas is going to use bonds to pay for this. The bonds are going to be repaid using sales tax revenue generated from the new stadium and the development around it. And the Chiefs are paying 40% of the construction costs. They're also going to pay $7 million a year in rent. Now, that sounds like a lot of money, right? $7 million. That's a big chunk of change. I looked it up, though. In 2020, NFL teams generated an average of $53 million per game.
Wow.
Per game. So you play about a quarter of a game, and you can pay your rent for the whole year on the stadium. If I were them, I would have said, give us the revenue of one game per season. You get. But here's the thing, too. These guys are worth $25 billion. And they could plunk that money down, all $3 billion of it, and build that stadium. The average lifespan of an NFL stadium could run 30 to 50 years. Now, you might have to repair it and refurbish it along that time. But so I haven't done all that math, but I'm almost positive you're making more than $3 billion over the course of that stadium. And again, the reason I bring this up is because I think this is an easy sort of concept to understand. And there's even conservative Republicans in Kansas now who are criticizing this deal, saying we gave them the moon. We gave them the moon. We do this exact same thing with industrial companies, with petrochemical companies in Pennsylvania and beyond, where these companies that already have more money than God, that they could easily plunk this facility down by themselves, wherever they want. But because politicians are so scared of losing a deal that sounds really great, we give them the moon. We give away so much. And then
wave around all these flashy numbers.
And we don't
like
even
when
get
the Sixers were talking about coming into Center City.
That's a great
in
point.
Philly.
Same exact kind of thing, right? Where these big, mega wealthy entities play us off of ourselves, and then it becomes a race to the bottom, where it should be the opposite. It should be like, wow, you got a really amazing workforce in Pennsylvania. You got all this great infrastructure. Can we please build there? And so, well, make us an offer. That's how it should be. But it's totally the complete opposite.
Let me handle the negotiations.
We're begging. That's right. They need to get you in there. We're begging for the scraps from their table that it takes them 10 years to build, and it poisons the community. And oh, guess what? It doesn't even work. And the return is a fraction of what was promised.
It's almost like the system was designed by and for them.
That's crazy,
What?
Joanne. What?
That would be crazy.
And yet, that is exactly what's happened, isn't it?
Well, and we see, even just in our region, right? So we're, Pennsylvania, we often hear economic development officials and others looking to Ohio and pointing to other states and saying, we can't be losing to Ohio. Yep. And if we look at the structures that were set up in Ohio to help attract economic development projects, one of them is called Jobs Ohio. And there's recently been some press about Jobs Ohio because Ohio State University is in the news often. Recently in the news because their former president was lost their position. And in part, that was due to an inappropriate relationship with a podcaster that was supported in part by funds that came from Jobs Ohio. And so there's been this little spotlight on Jobs Ohio recently, while at the same time, the West Virginia legislature was introducing a bill that would essentially copy and paste Jobs Ohio, but for West Virginia. So this idea that we want what Ohio has. But our economist on staff looked at what has happened in Ohio's economy since Jobs Ohio was established. And the reality is that it really isn't performing at the level that was promised. And so here we are pointing to this thing that we all want, the structure that we want to be like, we don't want to be competing with Ohio. We want to be doing exactly what Ohio is doing. But it looks like very few people, if anyone, stop to ask the question, is that actually working for Ohio?
Right.
And I think part of that is because it's not asking, is that working for most Ohioans? It's saying, who in Ohio is that working for?
Yeah.
And I think that's a really critical point for sort of our theory of economic development that we have constructed. And just, you know, as you're saying, some people say smokestack chasing, some people call it chasing ribbon cuttings. There are a lot of ways to think about it. But ultimately, what it says to me is that we are not grounding our economic or social policy in the well-being of the people who need our attention the most.
Amen. Yeah, I think that's a really great point. I don't know all the numbers off the top of my head here, but I know California, notorious blue state, Democratic powerhouse. It's like the 5th largest economy on earth, right? You name it, clean industry, dirty industry, they got everything there. And this idea that somehow we need to see like who can out Ohio or out West Virginia each other. They're beautiful states, home to lovely people. I don't know if you check, though, on their numbers across the board, like pick a number. They're not tearing up the world as far as economics, especially West Virginia. I was watching that legislative session pretty closely this time around, and man, they don't know what the hell they're doing down there. All they know how to do is cut taxes, but they're only cutting them for the rich because, you know, people are so poor. And so this idea that that's the only way we can win, just deregulate and lower taxes as much as we can to attract as much dirty industry as possible with as few guardrails on them as possible is, and to your point, who are we helping? Is it just like, well, you're going to be sick and you're going to live in a dirty place, but at least you'll have a job that you know, doesn't really pay, that isn't worth the offset? I don't know, man. It seems crazy to me.
But your politicians' campaigns will be well funded.
Yeah.
And there's an opportunity cost, right? It's like if we're waiting over a decade for an ethane cracker plant to come to our hometown, or if we're waiting on investments from other kinds of industrial or petrochemical or oil and gas facilities to pay off for our local community, that means that we're not doing other things, and we're also not demanding that the people who represent us do other things or invest in other things. And I think we really need to figure out a way to move collectively, to move out of this space where we have this singular focus on extractive industry-based development, and can imagine and work toward things that actually will support us in the places where we live.
Absolutely. I mean, for me, okay, Shell's coming in. Hey, give us $100 million to beef this community up. Boom. Because you know what? They can. Liz, you were talking about the fines regime earlier, where the company violates a permit, they get a fine. The fine, it's a cost of doing business. For us, it would be earth-shattering. $1 million, $800,000, $500K, you know, and a couple $1 million to them, cost of doing business. They can find that change in their sofa. The fines don't even slow them down. And so, okay, if you can afford to just blow the fines off, give us $50 million, give us $100 million. You say you're going to make a bajillion dollars off of this. Well, give us some actual money. The deals are always, they're going to put a new roof on the school. They can afford to build a completely new Monaca, which is where the Shell cracker, they could give everybody a new house and not even feel it, because that is how much money these companies make.
About the new roof on the school, they do that, right? They will do some really low-level investment in local public works, and then the community favors them. New uniforms for the Little League, things like that, to keep the community happy, while the community doesn't necessarily realize how much divestment is going on.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it becomes a real dependence. You know, it's like if you're in a place that's really struggling and there's someone who can give you new school uniforms, football uniforms, support your stadium. In the case of a small rural stadium, probably less than the Kansas City Chiefs.
That's right.
You know, support your stadium. That's real. Like, we can't discount the fact that, like, that is actually meaningful.
Yeah. How can you say no?
What it doesn't represent is systemic change, which is what we really need.
This isn't the fault of the people who live there. As you absolutely rightly say, Joanne, when you were in a tough spot like that, how do you say no? How can you say no when you're any port in a storm, right? And so I blame the leaders. And it's not just the current one. It's generation after generation. What do I always say, Liz? Nothing changes if nothing changes. And I don't care you look to West Virginia, right? It used to be a blue state. Now it's a red state. They were getting screwed by Democrats. Now they're getting screwed by Republicans. Nothing changes if nothing changes. If you keep voting people in who keep making the same decisions to say, how about we try this new dirty plant? Which the old dirty plant's gone now. Let's build a new one. Nothing changes if nothing changes. We have to be smarter. We simply do. We have to think harder and deeper and longer about what is sustainable jobs, what's not going to go boom and bust, what's not going to poison our communities in more ways than one. ORVI is doing that work, A lot of other partner organizations, ours included, we're thinking about this. The info's out there. It's really easy for these guys to hit the piñata that is industry promising big flashy numbers on the front end. They can't resist it, but we pay the price for it.
And I think one of the reasons is the system is set up so that there's always a new shiny promise before the previous one fails.
Very well
and
said.
so you always have this kind of constant stream of things to believe in and buy into, regardless of the validity of that promise. And that's a big part of what motivates us to do our work, is that we're showing repeatedly that there are structural reasons that these continued promises are not panning out for our communities, and that we're not going to solve that by buying into the next shiny promise. We're going to solve that by understanding the systemic dynamics that are at play and subverting them.
Yeah.
It's almost like rock climbing, and each time you grab the next holds, you're getting higher and higher up, and then you realize the whole thing is crumbling.
Yeah. I know. I think you started to get into this already, but I guess, what can we do? I guess two-part, if you're someone living in these communities, what can you do?
Read ORVI's report.
Yeah, so I'll start just by kind of reiterating a theme from earlier, which is ask someone who's doing something if you can tag along. It's sort of the inverse, right? Mm-hmm. It's instead of waiting to be asked, ask someone who is, working with one of the organizations that's active in your community, or someone who you see posting about issues or holding public meetings. Ask them if you can join, learn about the issue, and then I think learn how to engage.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, even in this day and age, there still are public meetings, and when there aren't, people can create their own people's hearings.
Right.
And there are ways to get involved in community meetings, in permit processes, in local organizations. And, if you feel very moved, even to start your own local organization and invite your friends to join you and learn about what's happening and what you can do and what structures there are that you can tap into. And also just to be curious and compassionate. I think we need both of those things as we're tackling these issues, because without curiosity, we're never going to expand our own perspective. And without compassion, we're never going to be able to create the collective that we need.
It's a good thing you didn't say that earlier, because we'd spend a lot more time. This is already a lengthy episode. I'm obsessed with that. Yes, curiosity. Guys, if you're listening, do some research, do some homework about a thing. Homework has never been fun. I know. Nobody's ever stoked about it, but this stuff is hard and it's complicated, and there's no research this thing, research whatever pulls you to look into it more. Do that, and then spread that interest, spread that excitement. Like you said, Joanne, if there isn't a thing, if there isn't an organization or group, be the first one to start it. Get some people together. Make a Facebook group. Is that a thing people still using Facebook?
Yeah.
Is that, whatever that thing is. Go ahead and do it. And compassion too. The 2 C's, curiosity, compassion. We need a little more. And I know it's so hard. Especially when you're on the front line of a thing. You pick one for today, and it could be really hard to let the compassion shine through, but we really need more of that, because all of us are going through a thing. It's a tough time. It's a tough time to be aware. Yeah. And so the curiosity and the compassion, let them flow.
So I could understand some hopelessness here, given your day job. What gives you hope? What keeps you going?
Primarily I have 2 things that are hopeful. One is very squarely in the climate realm.
Okay.
Which is, so we talked a little bit about the RISE PA program.
Yeah.
And that was part of the federal climate pollution reduction program under the previous administration.
Right.
And as part of that, people were invited to submit projects to do decarbonization work. So to address climate pollution.
Yeah.
And the program had, let's just say, roughly $4 billion worth of total funding to support projects across the country. They received over $33 billion worth of applications. And so this common myth that we are not motivated to address climate change and that we're not prepared to address climate change in our communities is completely false. They're sitting on the shelf in EPA almost $29 billion worth of unfunded climate pollution reduction work that could happen today. By its nature, it had to be shovel ready.
And that's a lot of jobs.
It's a lot of jobs. It's a lot of improvement to public health and community benefit. And so that gives me hope. It gives me hope that there's empirical evidence that people care about and have concrete plans to address climate emissions.
Love that. Definitely happy chick worthy.
Happy chick.
I'll take a happy chick.
I'll do a happy chick too.
Well,
we have to
all
happy
round.
chick to hope. And the other thing is actually like the hard sciences, right? So the idea that we as a community of people have figured out things like how to synthesize human protein and how to travel to space and how to do all of these amazing things makes me think that we should be able to figure out how to be in civil society together in a way that people can be well and supported, regardless of who you are, where you live.
And if that's not what it's all about, then what is it about?
Yeah.
Exactly. And, you know, if we're devoting resources to figuring out how to solve these really interesting and challenging scientific problems, certainly we can do that when it comes to our ability to live in society together.
Agreed. Yeah. I mean, like you said.
Beautiful. Beautiful words.
We put a man on the moon. We ought to be able to get along. We'll see.
We'll see.
We can certainly work toward it.
We can certainly work toward it. I was thinking about this the other day. We're living in a time where we've seen so much technological progress and advancements in such a short amount of time. Like you look back at the entirety of human history and the technological advancements, the ones that changed the world, they came along a lot slower. Like, did you see Joe just has a wheel on his cart? Like, oh my God, he's flying around. You know, that was a little bit more of a gradual sort of thing versus like, the computer came out in like, you know, the 80s, kind of like the home computer. And then we had the internet in the 90s and then social media. And now artificial intelligence is literally like everywhere. And it's coming quick and it's coming even quicker as the years go on. But I think maybe perhaps now we're kind of starting to adjust as a species to this technological onslaught. Like we were talking about at the top, people are kind of like, do you want to go outside? Like, do you want to like see people in real life? And that was after, you know, we're seeing so many people across the nation, especially young people who are just like sad and depressed and lonely because we're trapped in these virtual internet spaces. Not that you can't find community and companionship through that too, but I think it's really great when that translates into let's hang out in a park or let's get together and do this thing. And I don't know, you know, obviously there's so much uncertainty, but I'm kind of hopeful that maybe we are starting to finally move into that zone where we're sort of figuring out how to do this healthily and not have it poison us. I mean, we got a long way to go, but
love that.
Hoping we're moving.
That's also
in that
happy chick worthy.
You want another one, Joanne?
I had to.
She got to. She was
Yep,
prepared.
thank you.
That was thinking ahead.
No,
So,
it might be time for Sean's favorite question.
I think it is. So, Joanne, what is your walk-up song? And by that, I mean, you know, it's the bottom of the ninth, bases are loaded, 2 outs, game is on the line. What's getting you pumped?
Okay, so my song is Spitting Off the Edge of the World by the Yeah Yeah Yeahs.
Oh, nice. I love the Yeah Yeah Yeahs. Really cool group. Sort of like an art rock band. Been hanging around for a while. Nice. Why is that your favorite?
So it's a banger, first of all.
Number
I
one,
totally
hey.
love it. And also,
And you're from Bangor, so.
Yeah, exactly. Great.
Nice.
And Karen O kind of talked about the song as being of this time, right? Where we're in deep ecological distress. We're in pandemic times, still pandemic times. We're in like all these different overlapping crises, essentially, like the human polycrisis. Yeah. And that this is a moment to be both like really defiant and passionate, but also hopeful. Oof. And so I really like this idea that you can embody this like angry, passionate, indignant resistance moment while also being hopeful and just totally badass. Like, if Karen O is not a badass, I don't know who is. And I feel like we need that in our movement to carry us forward. And also, being from Maine originally, I love to go to the ocean in the off season. And so over the last year, I was at the Atlantic Ocean by myself. I went in the water. There was no one else around. And I just sang this song to myself. Nice. And it was like a perfect moment, being in cold water, no one else around, spitting off the edge of the world.
Oh, incredible. This is the second time on this episode I got chills. I mean, that whole story, Karen O, for folks who aren't aware, is the front woman of the Yeah Yeah Yeahs. She's a really cool chick, really fun artist.
Total badass. I have some Karen O songs on my power playlist.
Yeah, I've been a fan for some time. That is really cool. That's a really excellent choice. Now I'm like, I gotta go listen to that again. Like now I'm in the mood for it.
Hopefully while you're in cold water.
That's right. That's right. I don't know if I'm as acclimated to those conditions as you, being a Mainer. But
well, America 2026, we're all in cold water. And makes me really glad I chose this shirt for today, because I think it would be Karen O approved. A woman's place is in the resistance.
Absolutely.
Amazing.
That's right. And it's a Star Wars reference for folks who can't see. There's a little Rebel Alliance symbol at the top.
Well, Joanne, thank you so much for coming.
Oh, thank you all. It's been really wonderful to have this conversation with you.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's been amazing having you on the podcast.
Yeah, we'll have to have you back sometime for part 2.
All right.
To our listeners, thanks for listening to Cleaning Up Dirty. To help us clean up dirty, follow us at Clean Air Action everywhere on social media, and subscribe to Cleaning Up Dirty wherever you stream podcasts.
And, of course, a big thank you to our team, the best podcast producer in the biz, Mr. Bobby Safransky, and the best admin, legislative, and comms folks, Corinne Bishop, Emily Wildman, and Daisy Lennox. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.